Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe. Hello, everyone. I'm excited today to bring you Jeremy Utley. Jeremy is the co-author of Ideaflow, the only business metric that matters, and an adjunct teacher at Stanford University. Jeremy has also helped the world's most innovative entrepreneurs and companies with the ideas and methods that he teaches over at Stanford. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So to kick it off to start, do you mind giving us an idea, kind of maybe a little bit of your background? 18 years old, you graduate high school. Like, what's the beginning part of your kind of career look like to where you got today?
Well, I would start by saying I'm a recovering MBA, management consultant, spreadsheet junkie, lover of the pivot table, et cetera, who stumbled into design later in life. Coming out of school, my dad was a preacher turned litigator. So you can imagine what it was like for me to miss curfew in high school. You mentioned high school and I just had PTSD. But yeah, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham, and studied finance. Quickly realized I didn't like finance and went into management consulting. Didn't really like that either. So decided to go to business school, mostly as an opportunity to pivot my career, and was fortunate enough to get into Stanford. Went there 2007 to 2009. And because I was a glutton for punishment, I signed up to go back to my consulting firm, despite the fact that I knew I already didn't like the job because they were willing to pay. So I thought, what's 2 years of indentured servitude to get to go to business school for free? And in the middle of that experience and that kind of trajectory, I'll say this: I had a budding passion for economic development as a means of poverty alleviation and entrepreneurship, and spent a summer in Bolivia, in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, in college. Spent a couple of times in Mexico, spent a summer in Zambia working at an AIDS orphanage. So I had in my mind, okay, whenever management consulting is over, like I'm going to get into economic development. And the summer of my business school, summer between years business school, summer 2008, because I had a job lined up following business school, I ended up in a much more kind of liberal search for summer internships. Because I wasn't, typically in business school, folks are really looking to nail down like their job. So they're very strict in terms of what they're looking for. I supposedly already knew what I was going to do. So I ended up saying, hey, I want to work in the developing world, want to work in a country I haven't been in before. And I want to be doing some kind of economic development, and I'd love for it to be venture backed. And those three criteria led me to a startup that had just raised a few $1 million in Delhi, India. So I end up working at a startup in Delhi for the summer 2008. And, I'm doing pivot tables, spreadsheets, typical MBA kind of business development stuff. And there are a couple of designers there in the workspace who are doing, they're not doing design as I thought about. My wife's actually a fashion designer, and she was working as a fashion designer in Delhi. So I'm used to design in the kind of classical, I'd call it capital D sense. What I wasn't used to is the design in the lowercase d kind of mode of approaching problems differently sense. And that summer when I was working in Noida outside of Delhi, I kept kind of wandering into the design studio because I was really curious about how are they framing problems? How are they identifying opportunities for the business strategically, not, fleshing out the form and function of our products, but actually framing our strategy. And that was kind of that's the beginning of what derailed my kind of well-established but poorly enjoyed foray into management consulting. And from there, actually, I ended up taking a job at the design school, supposedly for 1 year. 13 years later, I'm still here and I've never left. And it's been an interesting kind of unexpected journey.
Okay. So can you give me an example of what were they whiteboarding out? Like, can you give me an example and some details on that? Example, the big D, little d.
Well, if you think about kind of big D, the question is, what's the shape? What's the color? What's the material? My wife was doing fashion design. What's the pattern? What's the textile? What's how does the garment flow? Right. Well, little d is like, what's the pain in our user's life? Is the pain that they're, what's the value proposition of this product? We're designing, at the time, we were deploying solar powered lanterns to households that lived off the electrical grid and were burning kerosene in their homes. So with the value proposition of the solar power, it's not carbon reduction. That's not what they care about. Yep. Is it about indoor air quality? Is it about better light for their children to study at night than the light of a flame? Is it reducing the fear that their kerosene lantern's going to burn their house down, right? Little d design is really concerned with, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And when you talk to investors, what's the problem, right? It may be different, right? You may conceive of the value proposition differently than you do to end users, than you do to, supply chain partners, right? But it's actually thinking about, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what about our product could be solving that? Wow, if we realize it's actually about helping children excel in school, children who live off the grid, well, all of a sudden our product suite shouldn't just include lights, but maybe we offer a tutoring subscription with the light, right? We didn't do that. But my point is, when you are thoughtful about the problem, a lot of times solutions present themselves and opportunities that present themselves that go far beyond kind of form, function, color, shape, et cetera.
Yep. So figuring out what the problem is, and also thinking like the emotional aspect of it, like what's the emotion that they're feeling, and is our problem going to help, change that emotion, whatever that
emotions are huge. Emotions are huge. Yeah. And I mean, if you think, and for me, going back to my kind of recovering MBA kind of joke, there's no cell in the spreadsheet for emotion.
Maybe
where do you
color,
put fear in the spreadsheet?
It's light pink or blue.
Yeah. It's laughable, right? And yet, so which is to say, we like to think about business problems as these kind of sterile, calculated, analytical, critical decisions. The truth is, human beings actually are highly irrational, emotional creatures. And if you want to, and if you look at the products that persist in being disruptive and being delightful, they engender what is known as irrational loyalty, right? Which is, you're not appealing to someone's reason. The reason you love your iPhone isn't because of the spec sheet, right? Apple's done something different there. And yet, so many business meetings, what we try to do is we try to we want to sterilize the environment. Just like a hospital gets rid of germs, we want to get rid of all non-quantitative information. Right. And what design does is it said, no, actually, let's foreground the non-quantitative stuff. Let's talk about the qualitative. Let's talk about the emotions. Let's actually orient ourselves around the emotions that we're designing for, because we know that actually fuels new ideas, and it engenders the kind of passionate loyalty from our customers or from our users in a way that kind of clear-headed reason and logic just can't. One of my favorite quotes is by David Ogilvy, the father of modern advertising. He said, "Most businessmen are incapable of original thought because they cannot escape the tyranny of reason."
Yep, it's a good one. So then
think about that's part of our problem, right? Is we aren't able, unless we can provide a clearly articulated empirical basis for our line of thought, we abandon it. And thus we are incapable of original thinking, as Ogilvy said. Anyway, I interrupted you. Yeah.
So then take me to I guess the book, right? Like what then led you to kind of write this book?
Well, I've been teaching, as I said, at Stanford the last 13 years, leading executive programs for the last 12, leading the accelerator for the last 6. So, teaching grad students for a long time, teaching executives for a long time, teaching entrepreneurs for, a little bit less than a long time. And I'm seeing some of these themes recur. And one of the primary themes that I became aware of is something that we've kind of touched on, but we haven't explicitly stated, but is how little on typical business people's radar the notion of inputs is, as far as decision-making, problem solving is concerned, creativity or innovation for that matter. Everybody's obsessed with output. The thing, the iPhone, the painting, poem, whatever it is, right? The business plan. What no one really sufficiently appreciates is that inputs actually drive outputs. Yep. And what designers and creative people more broadly happen to be, and I use that with air quotes because I don't believe in a creative person. But what people who identify as creative or who think of themselves as creative, what they do is they're actually really thoughtful about their inputs. They curate their inputs. They're obsessive about their inputs. They do this thing called seeking inspiration, which for most people in a corporate environment, when they think of inspiration, they think of some cheesy poster that's got like a group of people who are skydiving. It says teamwork on it, right? That's not inspiration. That's not inspirational, and it's not inspiration. If you talk to a designer, my fashion designing wife, she's going to Paris, to get inspiration. I think it's a boondoggle to get macarons, right? As a business person, because my trips are boondoggles. For her, she's got this incredible multi-sensory kind of input of textures and colors and fragrances that she comes back ready to design a collection, right? I was teaching a class with a hip hop artist named Lecrae. He's a Grammy award-winning hip hop artist. And we're teaching a bunch of MBAs and engineers and lawyers and doctors about the importance of going out into the world to get inspiration. And I can see this kind of dumbfounded look on their faces. I realize they're just like me 10 years ago. They think that this is a boondoggle. We're giving them a basically freebie assignment, right? Because they don't value it. And I said to Lecrae, what do you think of inspiration? And he dropped a bar as only a hip hop artist could. He said, inspiration's a discipline. And I realized that for him, what is a routine behavior, going out into the world to collect input, is for our students, these hyper-rational individuals, it's not even on their radar as an option, right? So that's kind of one thing. That's kind of one piece of going back to your question. I'm tracing the train back to the station. Why did I write the book? One piece of the puzzle is, and I would say there's three pieces to the puzzle generally. First piece of the puzzle is, no one appreciates the value of inputs to drive one's thinking. Second piece of the puzzle is, the truth is, and the research demonstrates, you need a ton of raw material to get to good. Linus Pauling, the only individual to win the Nobel Prize twice, when somebody asked him, how do you come up with so many good ideas? He said something very simple but profound. He said, to have a good idea, you need to have a lot of ideas. And we all go, okay, I get that, makes sense, I guess. What is a lot? And the empirical answer is, it's thousands, not like scores and not hundreds. It's thousands of ideas. And when we show the data to people, whether they're entrepreneurs or grad students or executives, they're kind of floored by the volume of data that's required, the volume of ideas that are required to get to commercial success. So that's the second piece. First piece, an underappreciation for the value of inputs to one's thinking. Second piece, an underappreciation of the number of ideas required to really innovate. And then the third piece for me is, I need this stuff. I found myself falling into the same cognitive biases that I'm trying to help professionals and executives and entrepreneurs avoid. Yeah. Even though I'm the professor, it's like, the old adage, physician, heal thyself. Professor, teach thyself. And, a lot of people say, write the book you want to read. This is the book I wanted to read. And I find myself even, 12 years into teaching this stuff, I was reading my audiobook and I would have to pause and take notes. I'm reading the audiobook of the book that I wrote. And yet I'm going, oh, that's good. I got to remember to do that, right? It's like the Men's Hair Club, right? I'm not only the president, I'm also a member. It's like, I'm not only the author, I'm also a student, right? So all those pieces kind of wove together as the point. This book needs to be written.
Yep. So let's talk about the ideas or the number two, right? You got to generate a lot of ideas. I think,
yes.
One of the problems I struggle with is like, I don't want to call it a shiny object, but you have all these ideas and then how do you got to prioritize which ones you want to focus on or move forward. Otherwise, if you try and do them all, you become totally diluted. So what's the next part of that? So you would generate a lot of ideas. I think a lot of people are good at that, right? But then what do you do from there to not be a
I would say, well, I would, so I'll, two parts to the question there. Or you made a statement and then you asked a question. Statement, I disagree. I don't think people are actually good at generating ideas. I would challenge that. So we can talk about that. But then what do? Suppose you're good at it. We'll take that as given. And I don't mean you, but the kind of generic you, the royal you. But suppose one is good at generating ideas. Then the question is, well, how do you know which ones are good? And what we say is don't pick. For sure, don't pick, because you're not going to pick. Research suggests that teams routinely pick their third or fourth highest potential idea, not their best.
Okay.
So we're demonstrated to be poor selectors. What we have seen entrepreneurs do is they commission scrappy experiments and they create data that gives them conviction. So instead of choosing ideas, what we say is, At the very, what most people want to do is choose idea. Notice the difference. They don't want to choose ideas, plural. They want to choose the one to do. And what we'd say is that for sure, maybe one is best, but the way to get the best one is to do lots, not just one. So if it's expensive to do one thing, you can only do one or maybe even none, right? I was at a trucking company in the Midwest. 20 plus year veterans in the sales team had this great idea for a, roadside assistance program. And I said, well, Chad, how much is it going to cost to run an experiment? He said, $30 million, give or take. I was like, I'm sorry, what? And then he laid out the business case. He said, I can get it. I know the CEO, he'll give it to me. I said, I know, that's the problem. If you ask for it, you're going to get it. But I said, how many other experiments can you run if an experiment costs you $30 million? And if you take, I'm a big fan of Bayesian statistics, which takes an incredible nerd to even make such a statement, but a priori probabilities matter. The a priori likelihood that any idea you have is good is exceptionally low. If you factor in a priori probabilities, as a Stanford professor and math nerd would suggest you do, it's insanity to only do one thing. It's absolute insanity. And you go, well, I only have money to do one thing. Well, I'd say, well, friend, experimentation has to be dramatically reduced in your eyes. A $30 million experiment isn't an experiment. That's a new product launch, right? And over the course of a couple of days, I worked with Chad to get him from $30 million at first, down to $200,000 at second, down to, by the time we got done, the amount of funding he was asking for was $15K. Okay. To deploy a scrappy experiment. I'm not good at math, but that's like, a lot cheaper, right? And at that rate, he can run like hundreds of experiments with the budget that he was going to get before, right? And so what I would say is, when you think about a volume of ideas, I'd say part and parcel to that is think about a volume of experiments. And the question isn't getting big data, it's getting good data. And as a former management consultant, I can say there's a big difference between big data and good data, right? You can get an intern to go to the mall with a clipboard and say, as I've done, by the way, speaking from personal experience, and say, excuse me, mister, can I have a minute of your time? My boss was kind of hoping that we'd put a food cart over there. And I was wondering, would you tell me if you think that's a good idea? And what does the guy say? Sure, buddy, put me down for a yes. And I could talk to 10,000 people, right? In an intern's hours. It doesn't take a long time to get big data, but it's bad data.
Yep.
And so the question is, from a vetting ideas perspective, not how do you get a lot of data, but how do you get good data? And we often say little data trumps big data. High quality data sets are what you're after. And that's where entrepreneurs and innovators are really good at crafting clever experiments that give them good data. So anyway, you asked the question, how do I know which of the things I've done I should do? And I would say, as long as which is plural, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is make it really cheap and scrappy and create good data. There's 2 or 3 whole chapters in the book on the art of experimentation. But I want to go back to the first thing, because you started by saying most of us are good at coming up with ideas. And what I would say, the reason I would challenge that is because I have a mirror, and I'm, as I said, not only the president of Men's Hair Club, I'm also a member. I'm not only the author of this book, I'm also the student. And what I know is we have this cognitive bias. It's called the Einstein effect. Okay, it's been well documented. Abraham Lutyens back in 1942, and Carl Dunker validated it. Researchers at Oxford have validated it more recently. But what the Einstein effect demonstrates, I call it the anti-Einstein effect, by the way. But what they demonstrate is when we think of a solution to a problem, 2 things happen. First thing is we stop the search, despite the fact that there's no evidence that the first solution we think of is the best. But the second thing, it's even more fascinating. Even when you prompt someone to look for better solutions, and there are better solutions available, they're blinded from seeing them, having seen a first plausible solution. This is the Einstein effect. And so when we say we're good at coming up with ideas, what research has clearly demonstrated is among experts and novices, we tend just to go back to, I kind of already have my favorite idea. I kind of already have my pet idea. And what you've got to do is you've got to be aware of that tendency. And I would say furthermore, if you have an instinct, we tell entrepreneurs in the accelerator all the time, the behavior that you've got to get really good at is scrappy experimentation. And so I'll tell you that. And I'll say in organizations, if I say quick diagnostic, you got 2 choices here. You don't have enough ideas and you need me to help you generate ideas. Or Option 2, you got tons of ideas. You just need to know which ones are good. I've never had an organization say we don't have enough ideas, ever. Okay. Everybody says we got tons of ideas. Here's the thing though, Brian, the thing that's fascinating is if you start running scrappy experiments, you know what everybody realizes who chose option 2? Crap, we don't have very many good ideas. And so maybe they have an idea pond. They don't have idea flow, right? They have a pond of things that have built up. We can teach them scrappy experimentation methods, and really quickly they go back to go. Oh my goodness. My friend Philippe runs the innovation lab at Michelin. He said executives will come to us with their $1 billion post-it, and we can demonstrate pretty quickly we shouldn't invest money. And that's an amazing service to the company when we kill ideas. It saves us a ton of money. But he said what most of them realize, and this is the challenge, that was my only post-it.
Yep. So then how do they come up with more ideas then? How do they get into this ideal flow state?
Well, so you got to make it a regular practice, really. That's the difference. For most organizations, they think of innovation as an event. It's a hackathon, it's either a lightning bolt moment, right? And they're just waiting for they're a victim of a breakthrough. They don't perpetrate them. They're just caught off guard. Whoa, where'd that come from, right? So there's that. Or they've got the hackathon, and when we're going to innovate in January 15th. You know why? Because that's when our next sprint is scheduled, right? And so innovation is wrongly perceived as to be this event rather than a capability, a muscle that should be developed. I'd say you should be, in the last 48 hours, you should have an example of innovation in your life. If you don't, you're not an innovator. Much like if you say you play the piano, if you haven't done your scales in years, you're not a pianist. If you call yourself a swimmer, but you haven't done laps in years, you're not a swimmer. Any more than if you say, a few months ago, I had a salad, so I'm healthy, right?
Yep.
Or I did a marathon when I was 20, so I'm exercise. It's like all of the things that we readily acknowledge your capabilities require attention and development. For whatever reason, people attend a workshop or a hackathon and they update their LinkedIn and they're forever an innovator. And I think it's bogus. I think it's a myth. I think it's destructive. And getting back to your question of what do you have to do to generate ideas, make it a routine. We advocate in the book a very simple daily practice we call an idea quota, where every single day you find a problem for which you're looking for the right answer, which, by the way, is itself, a trap, because very few of us are mathematicians, meaning very few of us are solving problems that only have one right answer, right?
Yep.
What's the subject line to this email? There's not one right answer. There's 1,000 possible answers. How do I give this feedback to this employee? How should I open the sales presentation? All of these things there's 1,000 possible answers, but we are always looking for the answer, which is kind of like a banana in a tailpipe situation, to use an Eddie Murphy reference. The point is, shift gears once a day and say, what's a problem I'm looking to the right answer to? It doesn't matter what it is. Stop and say, instead of looking for the right answer, try to generate 10. Come up with 10. It's a simple exercise, much like an athlete. You go to the grocery store with an athlete, like I go to the grocery store with my sister. She picks up a gallon of milk. She does curls with the milk. She's doing this on the way back to the cart. Why? She's an athlete, right? I don't have to say to her, Rachel, your coach isn't here. You're not wearing your knee pads. She's like, Jeremy, you're an idiot. Every gallon of milk's a dumbbell to an athlete. And to somebody who's got an innovation mindset, every problem is the opportunity to flex that muscle.
And then as part of the recommendation, going to that little D of what problem we're trying to solve and what's the emotion, and then what, like going at it, trying to find a different angle to go at it.
Totally. That's a huge part of the puzzle is framing. John Dewey said a problem well put is half solved. Half the battle is actually framing the right problem, right? But again, it's a volume proposition. Have we tried Einstein was once asked, I think a reporter asked him once, how do you make these major advances that scientists with higher IQs than you have made? You know what he said? I consider a problem from at least 9 angles before I try to solve it. And to me, there's an incredible value of approaching things from a bunch of different angles. And that's not a practice for most people. And what we're saying in Ideaflow is these things that seem like they're just random, you have to operationalize them as a practice. Even something as simple like I could ask you, when's your last breakthrough? What's the last time? And I would just define that as you delighted yourself by coming up with something unexpected. Yep. If you had to diagram it, what happened?
Yep. do these work with driving sales?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh,
I'm asking you. What was your last breakthrough? No.
Yeah, so I'm a lot of my things are around, my primary business, we operate automotive repair shops. I have 30 repair shops. And so, a lot of it currently is around, we have a number of consumer financing programs. So we can help people get their cars fixed today, whether they have good credit, no credit, bad credit, and they can pay us nothing. They get whatever, 3, 6 month, 12 months, pay it off, various programs that help people, make unexpected repairs affordable. Right? That's kind of the pitch and what we're trying to drive. And so, some of the breakthroughs is just trying to seeing that the people who use these programs are more loyal and they spend more money, because they like it. They see value in it. Right. And then it's us.
Think about the last breakthrough, describe the actual, or define it. Because what I want to do is I want you to kind of diagram how you arrived at it. So get specific.
So
what was the last time
breakthrough
you go?
Then, so it's related to that, right? Is, us, I don't know, realizing we're trying to figure out why we have different markets and why certain groups do a lot better than others. And it's really us diving in to figure out I don't know, there's different programs, the different programs that one of our groups does very well on another, and then the other groups do terrible on it. And just trying to figure out the breakthroughs, I don't know, figuring out what are these big objections that the people have, and then going person by person to try to get them fixed. Right, because a lot of it's emotional reasons.
It sounds like you've institutionalized that a little bit, or operationalized it, and I think that's you're ahead of the game, right? Because I talked to a guy the other day. He said, "Oh, I was talking to a stranger on the bus, and I realized, boom," and he had an epiphany. And I just asked the question, "So do you do that regularly now?" And he said, "Do what?" And I said, "Talk to strangers on the bus." And he goes, "No, what?" Oh, right. And people don't realize you treat innovation like it's this haphazard activity, rather than something that maybe it's not automatic, but you can bend the odds in your favor, right? And there are things that you can do that are simple practices you can incorporate that dramatically increase your likelihood of breaking through, right? That's going back to your question of how do you get people to get more ideas? You start to attend to how they come up with ideas, and then you create space to foster and to routinize or operationalize some of those behaviors.
Yep. And for us, it's a lot of it's looking at other, we're a franchise. So it's looking at whether other franchise groups, but then looking outside of our brand. There's another tire concept that does, 90% of their business is these payment plans. And then we get on their higher volumes, their Google reviews, people love them. For all these all these reasons that they help make it affordable. Their entire business model is this, affordability aspect. And so the breakthrough for us is this thing's whatever, a 10% part of our business. And we see there's traits of this loyalty and spend. This other company, it's 80% of their business, and people love it. 5-star reviews, every single person, because and they're specifically mentioning these options. And so we're just scratching the surface of, what could be doubling the size of our business. And so a lot of that though is learning by looking at competitors, trying to figure out what's different, right? Whether it's competitor or totally different industry, it doesn't really matter. But that's where honestly I get a lot of kind of breakthroughs or ideas, is just looking at what other people doing across different lines and figuring out, what can I apply to, our business. So
yeah, that's great. And operationalizing, ultimately, that's the way you support breakthrough thinking.
Yep. And then it's execution. The other part of this is in the execution of we have all these ideas, but then it's getting 200 people or whatever it is to try to do what you want them to do and understand it is, it's just a whole challenge in itself. But then our approach is trying to figure out, from the top level, or the things we can change that just give them the tools that make it easier. So it's, whatever, it's this financing thing, let's say. Then it's right. Can we make it easier for our guys to know which customers have done financing in the past, so that they can bring it up again, right? We can put a flag on their invoice with a little code or whatever that they would know and see and be all right, this customer did one of our payment plans a year ago, as a trigger to say, hey, maybe you should talk to them about a payment plan, because they're probably going to do it again if they did it in the past. Because a lot of times it's just
that's great.
Our guys having the, remembering to talk to them, or, overcoming fear of rejection, or, whatever it is emotionally that they're not doing what we want them to do. So that's our approach. We have these ideas, and it's like, how do we just make it as easy as possible that removes as much as the people element from it, in terms of, but it's, but then there's other parts that's, it's the idea of how do we train somebody, right? And how do we get them to believe what we believe? Because that's a lot of it, is they have to believe. They have to be passionate about it, at least in in the sales component of it. Obviously it's different if it's designing a product or designing some sort of strategy, but at least my world's primarily sales. So
yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
So what are some of the any companies or any great stories of companies you work with and some of the ideas that kind of came out of any of these that notable?
Oh my, I mean, the book, that's like an advertisement for the book, right? I mean, the book is filled with stories of our entrepreneurs and our students. And furthermore, even on our website right now, ideaflow.design, we've got a chapter called How to Think Like Bezos and Jobs, where we detail several examples of their breakthrough thinking, which led to because the thing is different about breakthrough thinkers, to sound obvious, is how they think. And it's not their genetics. It's not like Jeff Bezos is genetically predisposed to think of the Kindle or whatever, right? It's how they think. And that's a learnable trait. And so we've tried, as much as possible to document in the book for sure, but even in the free chapter on the website, there are routinized ways of thinking that lead to breakthroughs. I'll give you one simple example. Whenever Steve Jobs was stuck, he'd go to Macy's.
Okay.
And he'd walk around the aisles of Macy's for inspiration. Just a simple example. And, once when the iMac was being designed and it was too boxy, it looked ugly, he was walking around Macy's and he stumbled across a Cuisinart food processor and he bought it and he brought it back to the design team. He said, it's supposed to be like this.
More rounded.
And it's like, that's a physical example, but he also did the same thing. He went to the Ritz to get inspired about the Genius Bar. Right? A concierge, a high-end concierge in a retail store, that was unheard of, right? But the point is, he had an instinct to go out and get inspiration. That's one of the 7 kind of tactics in that bonus chapter. But the book is filled with examples of this. It's filled with breakthrough examples, and that chapter is as well. There's also a great there's a great story. Actually, we just had one of the chapters excerpted in Fast Company. It's called How We Helped Reboot a Silicon Valley Legend, about a story of our work with Fairchild Semiconductor and using a really profoundly valuable tool called analogous exploration. It's in chapter 10 of the book, but it's available for free on Fast Company. If you want to link to it, folks can check it out.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Cool. So where can people connect with you if they want to learn more? You mentioned again, at least the website for the book. They can download the chapter and where to find it.
Yeah, for sure. Ideaflow.design, great place for the book. My website, jeremyutley.design, is I blog every day there, or now in book season, it's not been so much every day, but I try to. Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on Twitter, Jeremy Utley, LinkedIn /Jeremy Utley. I'm easy to find. I love hearing from people. I love hearing stories and of application and questions and things like that. I have a great opportunity to get to interact with people like you and people who are really trying to do cool stuff in the context of business. And I love incorporating their stories into stories that I share. So I love your example of the sales team and helping them. And that's it's part of my craft to be synthesizing and processing and sharing tactics of amazing innovators.
Cool. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and, packaging all that up and writing a book about it to help other people. I think it's pretty awesome. I hope
it's a real help to the audience.
Yeah, no, I think no doubt. This has been super interesting and I appreciate your time and we'll definitely link up all that stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Take care.
That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Beers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.